On the clock, I'm Diane Brennan on News Radio 620 KTAR.
Live, local, first. This is News Radio 620 KTAR. Now, Bruce St. James has issues.
There you go. Welcome. It's 2:05. There you have it. We're jumping into this hour. We've got some time set aside because I think we've got a pretty important issue, and we sometimes I think it gets bandied about and people make claims back and forth, and I hope to kind of get to some of the bottom of this and learn some of the real details about Israel and its role in the Middle East and about the future of Israel. And boy, just in the last 48 hours, there's been a bunch of things going on there. And we actually have an expert with us on the phone right now, joined by Devin, Sper. And how are you today, sir?
I'm fine. How are you, Bruce?
You're here in Phoenix, aren't you?
Yes, I live here.
You live here. You just wrote a book. You have a brand new book called The Future of Israel. And my guess is the last 48 to 72 hours, you could probably write another 4 or 5 chapters in that book.
I'm afraid to say that almost every 48 or 72 hours one could do the same thing.
Well, if you haven't been catching up on it, I mean, what has happened in just the last few minutes, I mean, literally, is reports that Palestinian Authority Chairman Yasser Arafat is unconscious and being attended to by doctors, Jordanian doctors, and that his health is deteriorating rapidly. This just came out.
No, I hadn't heard that.
Just came out. It's actually on CNN right now. They're outside the hospital where his health has deteriorated and he has lost consciousness. Now, you add that to the things happening earlier this week where Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has come up with this plan to leave Gaza. And, I mean, boy, as I said, you stand still long enough around there and the world will pass you by. Let's get into some of the details and the effects on it. First off, you can tell us a little bit about the book because I want you to make sure to get that in there. And then we'll get into some of your views on the current events that are happening like today about these things. So tell me a little bit about your new book, which is called The Future of Israel.
Yes, the book is The Future of Israel, and I began speaking locally among the Jewish community about 4 years ago. I actually originally began about 20 years ago speaking against the peace process. I've long believed that it was based on false premises and would eventually collapse. As it did begin to collapse, audiences began to ask me, okay, we now understand the problem, we accept your analysis, where do we go from here? And I've always had a very clear vision of where Israel needs to go, which is very different than peace process. And this book is my answer to that question. Okay,
very fair. And as I said, I think it's fair to categorize you as, I don't want to use the term militant, pretty strong when it comes to Israel, that Israel needs to, the future of Israel is based on strength, not on negotiated weakness.
Well, I think the tragic history of the Jewish people demonstrates that the world will not accept us as a weak and small people, or let's put it this way, they will not leave us in peace. Mm-hmm. Neither will they leave Israel as a state alone in peace, and therefore we have no choice but to accumulate and exercise power.
Now, you say the world, and I want to preface it by saying a little bit. I support the right of Israel to exist. By the way, I completely support it, and I think the Palestinians lose any and all moral argument when they won't even acknowledge Israel's right to exist. For me, that you know, everything they say after that doesn't matter if you're not going to start it. So, having said what you say about Israel, I wanted to ask you some questions, and maybe you could help me understand. How's that?
Sure.
What do you say to the people? And it's even been a part of this campaign, this presidential campaign, that say that the Palestinians and the Arabs in the Middle East lash out at America because the United States supports Israel.
I think it's exactly the other way around. The reality is that what the Arabs are opposed to is the democratic, tolerant culture that we have here in the West, and particularly in the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, what Israel is to them is a little version of that right on their own doorstep.
Right.
And they can't tolerate that because every day they broadcast on Israeli TV and Israeli radio, debate, open news, a free society, girls in bikinis. The mullahs can't have that and still maintain the society that they maintain.
Not that close to them. It just drives them nuts.
That's right. So in actuality, the reverse is true. Israel suffers because she represents the West, and not the West suffers because she represents Israel.
Okay. Well, by the way, we're on the phone with Devin Sper. Devin wrote an outstanding book. It's a brand new book out called The Future of Israel, and you live right here in Phoenix also. You lived in Israel for a while and served in the military there as is required?
Yes, I was born and raised in the United States, in New York actually, but when I was 17 years old, I became a Zionist reading on my own, and I moved to Israel on my own, and I lived there for 10 years, and I served 3 years in the IDF.
Right, and I just so I know some people don't know it. It's compulsory that you serve, correct?
Yes, I did not have to go in when I did, but eventually I would have had to go in. In Israel, everybody goes in. That includes men and women.
Right.
And everyone serves 3 years.
Okay, all right. I got more questions for you as we try to understand this and really get some of your views on it. Okay, let's get to what one of the core contexts is, and believe me, I've had some of these people call me up, refer to it as a Zionist entity, won't even call it Israel. Where do they get this idea that the Jews somehow stole the land from the Palestinians?
Well, that is the lie and the line that they repeat, and as the Nazi propaganda minister Goebbels said, if you repeat a lie long enough, and if the lie is big enough, people will believe it. Mm-hmm. But it can be very easily disproven because our entire society here, Christians and Jews, is very familiar with the Bible, and everybody knows if you open up the Bible that you find Jews living in Jerusalem, living in the land of Israel, that in fact they are the original native inhabitants of the land of Israel. And contrary to Arab propaganda, they have never left, and they have always been there. And I think that a people that has lived in a land for 36 centuries in continuity has certain rights there.
Very fair. Okay, and say, and Mr. Sper, I want to preface things by saying you don't think I'm too much of an idiot. I kind of know the answers to some of these, but I figure you're better as an expert in giving the answers.
I appreciate that.
Some of these are softball questions. I'm going to underhand some of them to you. So, okay, you mentioned earlier, and you write in your book that you don't believe the peace process is in the best interest of Israel. Why is that, and what is the solution?
The reason for that is that there is a very big difference between peace and what they call peace process. And a lot of people confuse the two.
Right.
If we go back to the original idea here, it was land for peace. The idea was Israel was going to give away parts of her land,
right.
And I say again her land because it doesn't belong to someone else. And in exchange, she was going to give peace.
Got it.
And even though it is her land, she was willing to do that for the sake of peace. Now, Israel gave away land, but everyone understands and knows today that she got no peace in return.
Mm-hmm.
On the contrary, she's gotten an ever-increasing reign of terror. So to mask this obvious failure, the people who pushed peace now call it a peace process.
Right.
And therefore, Israel is not supposed to give up land for peace anymore because they can't call the constant bus bombings and slaughter of Jews peace, so they call it a peace process, whatever that means. And Israel is supposed to give up more and more land in exchange for some sort of a nebulous process that really doesn't mean anything except Israel giving up more land.
Now, I have a question for you. I've said it as a joke before, but I think there's a thread of truth to it. People talk about peace in the Middle East, and whenever they say that, I always ask them, can you tell me when there ever was peace in the Middle East? I think it's a wonderful thing to strive for and attempt to achieve, but as far as I can tell, going back to as early recorded history as we have, somebody's been fighting in that region.
Yes, I would say at least for the last 1,300 years, you're absolutely
Only 1,300. Right. Okay, well, we'll run with that then.
No, the Middle East has been a cauldron of intolerance, hatred, since the Arab conquest, certainly 1,300 years ago, but even before that, it's one of those areas of the world like the Caucasus, where the Balkans, where there's always been a lot of hate and bloodshed.
Yeah.
But I would point out that anywhere where the Muslim world touches the non-Muslim world, and not only in Israel, you have a Muslim world trying to expand into the non-Muslim world, and you have violence in Kosovo, in Sudan now, in Darfur,
mm-hmm.
in Bali, in Indonesia, in Kashmir, in India, in Chechnya, in Russia, in Serbia. All of these conflicts have the same common denominator. On one side are Muslims, and on one side is someone else on whom they border.
Right.
And their line, and what fools a lot of people in the West, is that at the very time they're trying to steal someone else's land, they're yelling thief.
Right.
and they've got everybody confused. But either you have to believe that everybody is picking on the Muslims,
right,
or there's some problem here.
Now, this week alone, I mean, if we were in Israel right now, this has been the topic of discussion, and it is the only topic of discussion right now, which is your Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon. They had a vote Tuesday, and the Israeli parliament approved his plan to take the Israeli settlements out of Gaza. This, as I said, I read in your book, you are certainly not a fan of giving back any land.
You read me correctly. I think the entire Gaza plan is very much like the whole peace process. It's something of a canard to make the people in Israel feel that there is a plan. I don't believe the government has any long-term plan. Mm-hmm. They go from crisis to crisis, reacting to whatever the enemy demands.
Playing more defense than offense.
Yes. If you think about it, the Gaza so-called plan is not a plan. There is no real written plan. Sharon has himself reinterpreted it many times, and it's never even occurred. The bigger problem is Israel is not in Gaza, you realize. Israel withdrew from Gaza 10 years ago under the first Oslo agreement. Now, every day they shell certain towns in Israel from Gaza, and how withdrawing certain settlements which are in very strategic places would mitigate that or stop the next missile is beyond me.
Yeah.
And people get all worked up in Israel, both on the right and the left, over whether they're for or against the plan. And in fact, this is a diversion because none of this solves the problem.
Yeah, well, and from what I've understood, by the way, and I've studied this a little bit, I don't think I'm as out of the loop as everybody on this. A lot of those settlements, and these things people talk about, are in strategic places. They are on hills. They are high up. They can see around. So, and the idea was originally, as I understood from the settlers, so they could see when they were coming to get them.
That's exactly right, and you are more up on it than most people. Let me be specific about
Please.
Gaza. What happens? Really, as I said, the Israelis withdrew from that area 10 years ago, at least all the populated area, so they're not ruling over anything, and it's a misnomer to call it a withdrawal from Gaza. They're not in Gaza. They control one road which runs on the border with Israel, with Egypt, between Egypt and Gaza. It's a patrol road,
right.
And it's anchored at the other end by a very small area of settlements, maybe a few square miles. Now, let me explain, if I could, the importance of that road. The Palestinian Arabs dig tunnels under that road to bring in weapons in violation of the Oslo agreements under which they got the territory from Israel in the first place, again, land for peace. And they use these to shell Israel, and I'm talking not settlements, they're shelling Israel itself.
Right.
Now, if Israel is to withdraw from Gaza under their plan, which means from that road, there is nothing stopping them from importing wholesale through Egypt heavy artillery and more dangerous anti-aircraft missiles and anti-tank missiles. That means
you lose a security buffer.
Yes, and it means that an Israeli airplane taking off from Lud Airport can be shot down by a handheld SAM missile by anyone in the Jabalah refugee camp. That's not a tenable situation.
Right, and we know from history there's plenty of people there that would try. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
All right, I need to take a quick break. Sir, if you would stay with me. We're on the phone with Devin Sper, wrote a book, actually. It's out right now called The Future of Israel, and it is a fascinating book with a real plan that has some quite different views of maybe what you've been told about Israel or about the process. And we're going to get back to talk to you. Also, we're going to update you on Yasser Arafat's health as it continues to deteriorate and the effect that might have on the region. You being an expert, I think you're going to know a lot more about this than me. Going to be right back. We've got issues. We're talking to author Devin Sper about Israel, about the things that are happening just this week in Israel, and we'll be back to talk more about them next on News Radio 620 KTAR.
In the 2000 presidential election, there were 105,405,100 votes. Only 51.3% of registered voters exercised their rights. That's barely 1 out of 2. The race was won by the smallest margin ever, just 537 votes. You can affect the outcome of an election. On Tuesday, November 2nd, you can make a difference. Get out. Go vote. Be heard. A reminder from News Radio 620. KTAR.
Finally, a program designed for the home seller, not the agent. Flexible fees, no upfront costs, cancel anytime. I'm Russell Shaw. With my no-hassle listing system, you can even sell your house yourself while listed and pay nothing. And if you're not happy, fire me. Mind you, I think you'll be happy because my average time for selling a house is only 26 days, and most of them sell for full price. I'm not trying to brag. I'm applying for a job. I want to be your realtor. Fact, my team and I help more home sellers sell than any other agent in Arizona. For a free, no-obligation information package, call anytime. 957-7777. Ask about our guaranteed sale program. 602-957-7777 or nohasslelisting.com. Sell over 2.5 times faster. 25 years of proven results. Russell Shaw, John Hall & Associates. 602-957-7777.
The tents are up and the prices are down during GM's factory-authorized year-end closeout. Visit the tents at One Hot Corner, 87th Avenue and Bell Road. Liberty Buick, Peoria Pontiac GMC, the largest Buick, Pontiac, and GMC dealers in the state. Peoria Pontiac GMC with rebates on professional-grade GMCs up to $7,000. Pontiac Action on 04 Grand Ams, $6,500 below MSRP. Liberty Buick's best-selling full-size sedan, Buick LeSabre, starting at $19,995. Buick, the spirit of American style. Peoria Pontiac GMC, Liberty Buick, over 1,200 new vehicles, One Hot Corner, 87th Avenue and Bell Road. Rebates, discounts, and selection. Plus, check your driver's license against our 6-digit VIN number for your chance to win a new Buick LaCrosse or Pontiac G6. See dealer for details. Liberty Buick, Peoria Pontiac GMC, 87th Avenue and Bell Road. You need to be here. Discounts include GMAC financing, financing in lieu of rebates, prices plus tax title license, and 269 Doc VOAC expires 11/104.
Attention Valley residents, do you want to save money? Well, it's time to call Gold Star Mortgage at 480-947-0101 for their amazing 4.2% 30-year loan with 10-year interest-only option. Cut your mortgage payments in half or more and no fees or no closing costs. Whether you're a homeowner or thinking of buying one, Gold Star Mortgage will lower your mortgage payment while even paying it off sooner. Gold Star Mortgage is located in Scottsdale. Call right now and ask for their incredible 4.2% 30-year no-closing cost loan. There are absolutely no fees and no closing costs. Again, no fees and no closing costs at Gold Star Mortgage. Challenge any other mortgage company with that, and you'll see why the Valley relies on Gold Star Mortgage. Stop thinking you can't when you certainly can with Gold Star Mortgage. Call 480-947-0101 to qualify over the phone. That's 480-947-0101 or visit goldstarloans.net. Rate based on prime minus 0.55%. No fee option based on $260,000 and above. APR 4.2% may vary upon credit. License number MBO 905309.
Welcome back to News Radio 620 KTAR. I'm Bruce St. James. I have issues, and I'm joined on the phone by author Devin Sper, with a Phoenix resident, actually, with a brand new book called The Future of Israel. Mr. Sper, how would people get a hold of this book?
Well, locally it's available at the Jewish Quarter, the Israel Connection, Temple High Gift Shop, or people can buy it anywhere by going directly online and ordering it at www.thefutureofisrael.net.
Okay, thefutureofisrael.net. And we'll make sure to get that up on our website also so that people who have more interest in this. Am I impressing you yet? You know, I'm not reading just talking points here. For a non-Jew kid from Phoenix, not bad, right?
I am impressed. Let me tell you, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There are supposedly intelligent people and experts who I hear in the media every day who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about on this issue, and you don't appear to be one of them.
Well, I hope. I'm not necessarily trying to impress you, but as I said, I've always been interested in this region because it seems like, well, so much springs forth from it, and I think as an American, it's almost imperative that we understand what's going on over there.
Yes, but the problem, I think, is that the Israelis don't know how to make their case. They are so certain in their innocence that they believe that it's obvious to everyone.
Do you think it gets mistaken for arrogance?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does, and there is arrogance. I won't say that there's not. But the Arabs, well, they're not very good at fighting wars or building countries or creating democratic societies. They're excellent at propaganda, and they really run right over Israel in that department. And as a result, they repeat certain slogans over and over again, like "they stole our land."
Yeah.
And the Israelis don't challenge the very basic premises of those things, and people don't know the truth.
Yeah. Well, now you make a point in your book also that you believe that Israel should achieve status as a major world power. Why do you say that, and how is Israel going to go about doing that?
Well, I say that because we've tried every other path. The Jewish people have tried powerlessness for 2,000 years, and it's not worked out too well. The Jews in the ancient times were a dynamic, expanding people. 10% of the Roman Empire had already converted to Judaism at one point. The wives of emperors, Roman generals converted to Judaism. When Constantine became Christian, he made it illegal on pain of death to convert to Judaism. Mm-hmm. And when the Muslims took over the Middle East, they did the same thing. And the Jews internalized this and thought that they would be left alone to practice their religion as a small people. But they have not been allowed to. No. And when Theodor Herzl came up with the idea of Zionism, he felt if we only had a state again, they would leave us alone. And that hasn't proven true. Yeah. Because the world is always on Israel's case. So it's not that we desire this out of ambition, but I don't believe there's any other choice. And if we want to end 2 millennium of Jewish suffering, we're going to have to accumulate power and play the game the way everybody else plays it.
It certainly makes a lot of sense. I was hoping that you could stay with us. We have to take a break and get in the news and everything, but I think this is important enough. Plus, I really want to get into a discussion with you on the wall.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yasser Arafat and his health deteriorating, and the war on terror. So you can stick with us for a little and help us understand some more?
Absolutely, I'll be here.
I really appreciate it. We're on the phone with Devin Sper, local author with the book The Future of Israel. Outstanding book. We're going to be back talking more about Israel and its role in the world next on KTAR.
Just a minute.
First, this is News Radio 620 KTAR. Now, Bruce St. James has issues.
Welcome back. We're going to jump right now into Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader passing away at the age of 75 yesterday, and of all places, France. How appropriate. And I love how Jacques Chirac made time for Yasser Arafat, but couldn't find any time to meet with the Iraqi prime minister. How perfect of them. And you wonder why I've got it in for the French. We are lucky to have with us, by the way, a gentleman we've had on the show before who's going to help us understand a little bit of the ramifications, a little bit of what can we expect now coming out of there. And he's with me on the phone right now. Welcome to Devin Sper, author of The Future of Israel. And you live right here in the Valley also. So welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Bruce.
How are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
As am I. I think it's a good thing, by the way, but that's my personal opinion that Yasser Arafat is no longer breathing the same air as us. What is your take on this?
I think it's the first good thing he's done for the world in a long time.
Touché. Absolutely. Now, looking in the future now, are you more optimistic about peace in the Middle East or the concept of that, or does it make you pessimistic?
It doesn't make me pessimistic. The death of Arafat is a good thing. He's been an element for instability and violence in the area for his entire life. It can't hurt that he's gone, but I'm not as optimistic as many are, people who have blamed all of the problems on him and hold the Palestinian people not responsible for their actions. Because he's created a very radicalized population there. They've made a cult out of suicide bombing, and that's not going away tomorrow.
Right, and basically the people behind things like that are Hamas is really the tip of that spear. Fair enough. Is that fair to say? And they're part of this political process. We're going to have an election apparently within roughly 60 days, and there will be Hamas candidates on it. Is that fair to say?
It's fair, but it's more than that. Arafat, more even than Hamas, and long before Hamas existed, was behind terrorism. He was the father of modern international terrorism.
Yes, I credit him for inventing airline hijackings and suicide bombings.
And that's correct. Correct. And he has killed many more people than Osama bin Laden has killed, and Osama bin Laden will have to work long and hard to catch up to Arafat. And the problem is therefore not limited to Hamas, but the entire legacy that Arafat leaves among the Palestinians is a legacy of violence and radicalism that just isn't going to go away soon.
Now, later in his life, even I can see that he attempted to, tone it down. Is that a nice way to put it? And attempted to come across more like a statesman and distance himself from the terrorists. Is this why the rest of the world, you see these outpourings and I mean, you know, the lengths the French are going through for him is just disgusting to me. But it worked on some people, didn't it?
It did, and I only disagree with you in nuance. And you may be saying the same thing. He made a tactical decision with the Oslo Accords that he would accept any land that the Jews were foolish enough to provide him with, to create a state from which he would destroy Israel. That was a tactical, not a strategic decision, and that is the reason, and he has said as much many times. I'll just quote to you something he said in Stockholm in '96, which is 3 years after he signed Oslo. He said, "We plan to eliminate the state of Israel and establish a purely Palestinian state. We'll make life unbearable for the Jews by psychological warfare and population explosion. We Palestinians will take over everything, including of all of Jerusalem." So this
doesn't exactly sound like a moderate, does it?
He was not a moderate. What he did is give enough face to people like the French and others around the world who wished to pretend that they did not know that he was a terrorist. He was always a terrorist. He never gave up terrorism, and in practice continued to practice it throughout his entire career. There is no period of time in which Yasser Arafat was not personally involved with planning terror operations and carrying them out.
We're on the phone with Valley resident and national author, a new book of yours called The Future of Israel, Devin Sper. You lived in Israel, you served in the military over there. I think it certainly qualifies you as understanding that region a lot better than me. Do you think that the moderates are going to have any sort of a voice now in the new Palestine, if you will?
No one can predict the future, but if history is a guide, the problem in the Palestinian society in particular, and Arab society in general, is that the most violent common denominator rules the street, and the reason is that there is no democracy. And when there is no democracy, it is the most violent element that rules, because it's mob rule. Now, a test of this will be whether they in fact have elections.
Yeah, as they've stated, they believe they're going to happen within 60 days. That's what their law allegedly states.
You know, as I said, the population is very radicalized. They might well elect Hamas leaders or someone like Marwan Barghouti, who's sitting in Israeli jail for multiple murders and is right now the most popular leader they have. Basically,
wouldn't that just be the irony of all ironies that the Palestinians would elect a person who is currently sitting in an Israeli jail? That would just be perfect.
But from their point of view, that is exactly the source of his popularity.
Sure.
And anyone who cooperates with Israel is unpopular, and that therefore if there are moderates, if we imagine, for example, Abu Mazen to be a moderate, which is not certain, but if we imagine that to be the case, he may not be able to state his positions openly. And this is what I mean about the radicalization of that society. They have not been taught to go towards compromise, but rather towards an absolute hatred of Israel.
Help me understand a little bit, and as we talk about kind of the life and times of Yasser Arafat as he went from being a military terrorist figure to more of a, as I said, you understand why, the attempt to look more diplomatic. His legacy, is his legacy one of terrorism? Is his legacy one of failure in the sense of the deal he left on the table? The fact that he could have gotten so much more years ago at the negotiating table and walked away?
I think the real legacy of Yasser Arafat is the current wave of terror and the rise of international terrorism that we're witnessing everywhere here, that were witnessed on 9/11, and that they witnessed in Chechnya a short time ago, and in Bali and throughout the world. And the reason for that is not only Arafat himself, but more specifically the reaction of the world to Arafat. And I think you see that very clearly in the adulation and rock star treatment that he's been given in death. And what that shows is that the world has learned nothing from the mistake of putting a terrorist on a pedestal and not understanding how that would inevitably lead to the spread of terror internationally.
So do you think, in a de facto way, because he's held up like the rock star, as you say, it might lead the Palestinian people to find someone as close to him as they can find? Because this is what cuts through.
Yes, but the Palestinian people are the least of anyone's problems. The entire Arab world, anyone who has a grievance against anyone, can look at this funeral in which heads of state, in which we apparently are sending our Secretary of State at a time when we claim that we're in a war against terror, and how we cannot see the mixed message that we're sending to people who might be for or against terrorism. I don't understand.
Well, play along with me here, and I think it puts us in a tough position. I grant that there has to be, and I believe that there are Palestinians and there are Arabs who don't want to fight, who don't want to commit suicide bombings, who don't think Yasser Arafat was on the right path. I think they exist. What percentage of the population, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they exist. How are we as a people, how is the United States or how is the West supposed to show some respect and reach out to them without appearing to endorse the radical wings of the party there?
First of all, let me agree with you. I know they exist. I personally know them and know that they exist. And I might even wager that they are the majority of Arabs and maybe even of Palestinians, although, again, that's a very radicalized population.
Right.
Average people want to live their life, but the society in which they live does not allow you to state those positions openly. Many people and editors in Palestinian areas of newspapers who have made statements to that effect were immediately assassinated. There's example after example. What we can do is just the opposite of what we're doing. We put Yasser Arafat in charge of the Palestinian people. We in Oslo gave him a state and control of the media and control of the police, and therefore suppressed anybody who could potentially rear his head. Now, what is an average Palestinian who, say, wants peace, the type of person you and I are now talking about? What is he supposed to think when the Secretary of State of the United States and the Prime Minister of France are bowing at the casket of a guy they know is a terrorist? Is he going to open his mouth and condemn him? Is he going to be more Catholic than the Pope?
Yeah, so it has a chilling effect on the Palestinians, the moderates, the peace-loving people.
True moderates. And by that, you and I both understand that we're not talking about tactical moderates.
We're grading on a curve, is the way I put it.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break. We're on with Devin Sper, author of The Future of Israel, a Valley resident, and we'll be back, and we're going to discuss more about the death of Yasser Arafat, the impact it has on the Middle East, on Palestine, on the relations with Israel. A few more of those questions. We're going to get into them next. It's Bruce St. James with all of my issues on News Radio 620 KTAR.
He was the...
Welcome back. It's News Radio 620 KTAR, and I'm joined on the phone by Devin Sper, once again, the author of The Future of Israel and Valley resident, and kind of my expert on Israel and all things Israeli, and I appreciate you being on the show, sir.
And I appreciate the opportunity.
Help me understand a little bit as we look back on Yasser Arafat's life, his background. Where did he come from? How did he, in 75 years, get to this position? I
think that's a good question. Let me tell you something about Arafat. His original name was not Yasser Arafat. His actual name is Abdul Rahman el-Husseini. He was born in Cairo, Egypt. Now, it's very important to understand that his claim is that he's a Palestinian refugee, and yet he was born in Cairo. He is, in fact, an Egyptian. This is his own biographer admits this, and there is no one really in the Middle East who denies this fact. But the more important point is that his name was El-Husseini, and he changed it to Arafat for a very specific reason. And if I could, I'd like to just relate a little bit about the history of his family, because I think it's important to understand who he was. Is that okay?
Please, go right ahead.
The leader of the Palestinian movement in the World War II and in the 1930s was a man named Haj Amin el-Husseini. Haj Amin el-Husseini was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, and he was a religious fanatic who hated the British and hated the Jews. He allied himself with Adolf Hitler, who the Palestinians used to call affectionately Abu Ali, and in fact fled to Nazi Germany because the British condemned him to prison. And he spent the war years in Berlin as an aide to Hitler and an advisor on the final solution. And he participated in the final solution, that is the Holocaust, in Croatia, where he supervised Muslim Croat units who killed many Jews and Serbs. After the war, because the Nazis had lost, he faded from view. Yasser Arafat, alias Abdul Rahman el-Husseini, is the nephew of Haj Amin al-Husseini. And he was born in Cairo because that's where his family in the end fled. They could not go back to Palestine because it was ruled by the British.
Sure.
And he, in the 60s, became the head of the Palestine National Movement. He wanted to erase, he's a very astute self-promoter from the beginning, and he wanted to erase the connection between his family and the support of the Nazis in World War II, and that's why he changed his name to Yasser Arafat.
Wow. Look at that. It's not just some conspiracy theory either. This is the real deal.
This is fact, which people can read in his own biography, which people who are familiar with the Middle East will not deny.
Fair enough. Devin, I wanted to bring up something, and as I said, it just leads to some of the greater issue about this. And I know you know that I'd like to talk about Israel and Palestine all day long. It's something that fascinates me. I saw a great documentary just the other day called Ford Transit. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't.
It was a small documentary filmmaker who went to basically Palestine and rode around in those the taxis, which are all Ford buses.
Yes.
And they go from checkpoint to checkpoint. And the way you get around is you take the bus and you go jump in a little Ford van and you go from one checkpoint to the other. Then you get out, you go through the checkpoint, you jump in another Ford van, and you can kind of make your way across by jumping in it. And they just trained a camera on the people in the bus and asked them questions and just talked to the general people. And as I said, I was taken by, and there's a certain amount of sympathy. I won't lie. The amount of people on those buses who said, they do not support suicide bombers, and they feel bad for them. And one lady's daughter was one, and she bemoaning this, and how did she get caught up in this, and didn't understand that's not how she raised her daughter, and people saying this is not a solution, and it just, as I said, that how long can that silent majority continue to exist in Palestine?
It's existed in the Arab world for at least 1,300 years. The rest of the world, is much of it is not like the United States, where the assumption that the majority in the end will have its say in the next election, or through the free press or through the free judiciary will out. In a dictatorship, in a world where the strong rule the weak through terror, there is no recourse. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, those people have been suppressed for a very long time and do not have the same feelings that we do in this country, that they have the right to publicly express their opinion.
No. Well,
and that is the real problem. You cannot have peace in the Middle East until the Arab world democratizes and allows its own people to express their opinion. And unfortunately, this is not something we can do for them.
They must do it on their own.
They must. We have to take the position, as we do with ourselves as individuals, that ultimately people are responsible for their actions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the Arab people need to take responsibility for the mess that their part of the world is in. The fact that a few people own all the wealth and most are impoverished, that people own islands in the Caribbean and others live in tents.
Yeah.
And we can try to offer them the ideal of democracy, which I think is we're doing correctly in Iraq. I think that's what we need to do. Ultimately, they're going to have to take responsibility for improving their lot.
Very fair. We are about out of time, sir. I thank you for joining us once again, Devin Sper, the author of The Future of Israel. And your website, devinsper.com still?
Devinsper.com, but since many people won't know how to spell that,
yes, go ahead.
thefutureofisrael.net will also get you there.
There you have it. Sper spelled S-P-E-R. Thank you very much. As things continue to unfold in that region of the country, we'll continue to have you on and get your perspective on things. I truly appreciate it. Thank you very much. So there you have it. The Palestinians and much of the world mourning the death of Yasser Arafat, many others rejoicing and looking forward to possibly and hopefully some more moderate representation in that region. We're going to be back. We're going to talk more about Veterans Day and the idea of honoring veterans. We'll do that next.